tabs open. I couldn't find my tab where the music was coming from. But thank you so much for being here. We'll give folks just one more minute. We'll get started at 3:35. Again, thank you for being here and being on time. We appreciate you. Laura, there is for being here and joining us on this second session. Is there anyone here who's here for the first time?
Yes, it's me, Marta Arriola.
Yay, thank you so much, Marta. Marta, we saw your email. We were just about to send it over and then I saw that you joined in. But thank you so much, Marta, for joining us. Yeah, and so if you're here for the first time, just wanted to extend a welcome, right? We can talk later about what being part of the cohort requirements are and what that would look like. But thank you so much for being here if you're here for the first time. We had a great first session where we got to make some really deep connections across math and who were our first math teachers, and we explored our feelings around math. And so it was a super powerful session. And we'll touch a little bit on that today, do just a tiny bit of review. But if you're here for the first time, thank you all so much for being here. All right, I'm going to start off with some acknowledgements. And so that just so you all know, right, the Count, Play, Explore professional learning resources are made possible by the team over at Count, Play, Explore, and they are an early math and science initiative that is led by the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, Early Care and Education Department. And so this initiative is generously funded by the California Department of Ed and also the California State Board of Education. The resources that we'll share to you, right, are all intended to be used as a guide for implementing evidence-based strategies, promoting active learning, and encouraging developmentally appropriate practices in early education settings. And so just want to make sure that I take time to acknowledge the great work happening over at CPE through Fresno County Office of Ed, and also collaborating with West Ed and gathering some research, right, on the impact of the CPE grant and the work that we're engaging in here together. I'm going to go ahead and put the attendance QR code up, but you can also just type in the bit.ly link if it's easier on your devices. And if you can please take a couple seconds, a minute to complete the attendance form. And as you complete the attendance form, if you'd like, as soon as you're done with that, because there are some people joining us here for the first time, I'm going to invite you all to drop in your name, your role, and whether you're at a district, organization. We have folks from a lot of a huge variety of places, and I love it, right? Because we get to tap into each of your areas of expertise. Also, what city or state are you joining us from? While the initiative is California based, right, we did have some members from out of state. And so if you can please drop that in the chat. And then I also want us to reflect on what was the last thing you counted. So today's session is all about numbers and counting. And so I want you to think about what was the last thing that you counted. And so as you finish completing the attendance forms, I'm going to invite you to drop all of that good information in the chat. Yay, welcome Michelle from Whittier. You're right down the street. Well, a little bit, right? With LA traffic, more like a 30-minute drive, but nearby. Welcome Ruby from Whittier also. So I'll give you all just a couple minutes. All right. And again, I'm going to invite you to think about what was the last thing you counted and drop it in the chat. Oh, from San Jose, from Northern California, welcome. You counted cubes today. Oh, Kendra, you said kinder teacher, cool. Days in school, yes. Does anyone have a countdown for how many days left? Counted flyers from Coachella Valley. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you.
The number of students in your class. So does anyone have a countdown for fall break? I remember when I was a classroom teacher, I always had countdowns till the next break. So countdown to winter break, countdown to spring break, and then finally countdown to summer. Oh, pieces of tile for an art project. Thanks for sharing, Adela. All right. So as adults, right, we count all the time, oftentimes without even realizing. And just like us, children count with purpose, right? And they do so to understand their world, to solve problems, or even to communicate ideas. And so as we go on with today's session that's all about number and counting, I want us to keep that in mind, right? Counting is way more than just reciting numbers. It's actually a way of thinking, a way of reasoning, and a way of connecting ideas. And it really is a foundation for mathematical understanding. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on, just making sure that you all got the attendance sheet. If you didn't, the link is in the chat. Feel free to do that whenever you get a chance. Just a quick overview of our professional development sessions scheduled for this school year. And so thank you all who joined us on our launch on October 4th. Today's the second session, number and counting across the ages. We have 3 more sessions scheduled throughout the year, right? And like I said before, I mentioned the being part of the cohort also requires that you participate in coaching sessions. Now, those coaching sessions haven't been scheduled yet. We will be sending out a survey to see what days and times works for you and what you prefer for coaching sessions. There's a little more flexibility in scheduling those. And so we'll definitely send out a survey so you could give us some feedback and see what works. I know some people like directly after school. Some people like to have time to have dinner, right? So just gonna want to gather some feedback around what would work best for your schedules. And so the way we designed our timeline was that we wanted to schedule a PD session, right, followed by a coaching session, where in that coaching session you would get support, right, that you needed, or just a space, right, that you feel supported, have an opportunity to answer questions based on the PD that you attended previously, right? And so our next coaching session is scheduled sometime in November, can support that first math mindset sessions, and then this one, the November and November number and counting across the ages, right? And so same pattern throughout the year. Then in December, we have our geometry journey PD. And then in January, right, we'll have a coaching session that supports that PD you received in December. And so we'll be reaching out to you soon to get some feedback about what days and times you feel would work best for your schedule for those coaching sessions. Just a very quick reminder, right, to participate in the cohort, you are required to commit to 20 hours of both including, right, PD and coaching sessions. And so if we go back and see here, just by attending these 4 sessions, you've already completed half of the grant commitments. And then the other 4 coaching sessions that would be sprinkled in between the months where there's no PD. And so that consists of 12 hours of professional learning, right, throughout the whole school year, and then 2 hours, so a total of 8 hours for the coaching sessions. And then of course, right, we ask that you take back and implement through whatever your capacity is, right? If you're an instructional leader, a teacher, someone who supports families and communities, that you go back and take the learning that happens here back to the children. So make sure that this has impact, right, which is the main goal of us doing this. And then also participate in surveys. And so like I mentioned before, we are collaborating with WestEd, and they're gathering just data on the efficacy and implementation in classroom spaces. So WestEd might reach out with some surveys. I know that there were some of us who hadn't yet received the surveys. I will follow up with WestEd and see what's going on there. But if you haven't received any surveys from WestEd, requested yet, it's okay, right? I'll reach out and make sure that everyone who is interested in being a cohort member receives the survey. And then finally, we have our CPE participant folder. And so in this participant folder is where all the resources will be housed. So everything that I share with you today, a copy of the slide deck, just some other resources that CPE makes available will all be uploaded on this Google folder. And then also in the participant folder is asynchronous options for those of us who can't attend a session, right? While ideally we invite you, of course, to attend live sessions the most that you can, we understand that life totally happens, right? I had someone reach out today to me and say, I have a dentist appointment, I just can't reschedule. And of course, that's absolutely okay. We would never want you to miss anything this important, that important, right, to be here. And so should there be a session that you feel that you just couldn't attend, right, because life happens, that's not a huge deal, right? We believe in flexibility and we believe in supporting you in the ways that you need so that this is successful and you feel is manageable, right? And so should there ever be a time where you can't attend, that's totally okay. We have asynchronous options. And what those asynchronous options will usually consist of is a recording of our video. So we'll have all of this recorded, right? We'll make it available to you all on our website, and then we'll usually ask you to reflect on some of the content that you saw in the session, right? And so again, the asynchronous option shouldn't add more stress to anyone's life, right? That's not our intentions. We don't want to do that. We don't want this to feel like yet another thing on your plate. And so again, should you ever need to go the route of asynchronous, then and there's any questions about the, I don't want to say assignment, but about the work that you have to complete, right? Again, typically that's just a personal reflection on what you saw through the recording. Feel free to reach out, right? We're happy to support in any way that helps. All right. So for today's session, right, we're going to start by exploring and playing with numbers. And so we're going to do a little fun activity right now and really get just hands-on on noticing how numbers show up in different ways in our lives, right? And then after that, we're going to take a closer look at the 4 components of numbers and counting and what those exactly are and why they matter for children's mathematical thinking. Followed by that, we'll also review how children develop their knowledge and skills in number and counting. And so we'll talk about how the shift happens from early understanding in number and counting to then, right, move on to more complex ideas around number and counting. And then at 5 p.m. we'll have a visit from Shunya Kids. I don't know if anyone has heard of this platform, but they'll be joining us today and they'll be telling us a little bit about what their platform looks like and how they support mathematical skills in our youngest learners. And so at 5 o'clock, we're going to welcome our visitor from Shunya Kids, and she'll share some information about her platform. All right. Okay, that was a lot of me talking, and so now it's time to start playing a little bit. And so again, one of the main components or ideas behind Count, Play, Explore is that math should be fun, it should be playful, right? And so also part of that is that we as adults also should have the opportunity to experience math as joyful and as playful. And so we are going to have a quick number game. All right, I'm sorry. I just got a message that my screen looks like it's smaller. Does that look better? No? Does my screen look good? Is that better?
You sound kind of scratchy, Natalie. I'm not sure if it's just me or everybody, it's just me having the issue or.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Do I sound scratchy? Am I cutting off?
No, it was just the presentation.
No.
Okay, and does the presentation look better now?
Yeah.
You're not in presentation mode. That's the only thing. So it looks bigger than it did, but
oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go in the bottom. Yeah. and put it in full,
Enter full screen.
yeah, enter full screen.
All right, thank you so much. Well, hold on, I have
There you
to
go.
wait. I went back. Ay. Okay, slideshow, presenter view, and then full screen. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about this. Okay, hold on, give me just a second. We're gonna get to the number game. Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. I want to. Okay. Does that look okay, everyone?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Let me just all right, there it goes. Okay, so back to our game. So thank you so much for letting me know, by the way. Absolutely feel free to tell me when I'm doing something wrong or when you have a question, right? We're gonna be working for a while together, and so feel totally comfortable in letting me know. And so let's jump into our alphabet counting game, where we're going to explore a new counting system. And the point of this is to experience how young children learn to count and how they make connections between quantities, number words, and numerals through counting, right? And then once we play a little bit with that, we'll recognize just different strategies that children use when learning how to count. All right. So we are going to use the alphabet as a counting system to count a set of items. And so instead of using numbers, we're going to use letters, and we're going to use the alphabet, right? And again, the purpose of this activity is just to help us become more aware and think about and sort of put ourselves in children's shoes when thinking of the skills that are involved in counting. And so again, we're going to use a new counting system, the alphabet. Okay, this is going to be a little awkward, but I want us to do it. But first, we're going to sing the ABCs. And so I want everyone to unmute their mic, and we're going to sing the ABCs together. Everyone ready?
Yes.
All right. I see mics unmuted. All right, ready? Don't let me do this alone. Okay. 1, 2, 3. A, B, C, D, E, F,
G,
H, I,
A, K, L,
M, N, O,
L,
P,
M, N, O,
O, Q,
P,
R, S,
R,
T,
S,
U,
T,
V,
U, V,
W, X,
W,
and
X,
Z.
Y, and Z.
Now I know my
Oh, my
ABC.
ABCs.
Next
Next
time,
time,
won't
won't
you
you
sing
sing
with
with
me?
me?
Yay! Thank you for not leaving
Yes.
me alone. I appreciate you all for doing that. So I have a core memory. When I was in first grade, I remember my teacher asked me the ABCs, and I sang the song, and between Y and C I said and she marked me wrong. She said I didn't know the alphabet. And so just a quick note, I never let go of that. All right, so now we're gonna move on. All right, so again, we're going to use the alphabet as a count list. And so if we're using the alphabet as a count list, what is the first letter in the count list? What's the
A.
first letter we're using? A, right?
A.
And what is the last letter in the count list?
Z.
Z, right? Very good. Okay. All right, so now using the alphabet as our counting system, and we're not going to send you off to small groups, we could just do it all together in the chat. I want to ask you, Remember, we're using the alphabet as a counting system. How many fingers do you have on one hand? So feel free to drop it in the chat. Drop it in the chat. How many fingers do we have on one hand? All right, I see lots of fives because I think it's just natural. But remember, if we're using the alphabet as our counting system, this would be A, B, C, D, E. So we would have a total of E fingers in our counting, using our new counting system. Does that make sense? Let's try this one more time. So now I'm holding up how many fingers using the alphabet as a counting system.
I see 3.
Yes. And so remember, we're shifting, we're not using numbers, we're going to use the alphabet. So I'm going to count my fingers using the alphabet. A, B, C. I have C fingers that I'm holding up. Do we kind of get the gist of it? Okay. All right. So now using the alphabet, remember, we're not using numbers because numbers is easy. It comes super natural to us, right? But remember, the point is to sort of put ourselves in our students' shoes and experience what they go through, right, when learning this counting system. And so now I'm going to ask you, remember, we're using the alphabet. How many fingers do you have on 2 hands? And don't answer yet. I'll say go so that you could like waterfall drop it into the chat. So how many fingers do you have on 2 hands? Don't put it in the chat yet. I'll tell you when. All right, drop it in the chat. How many fingers do we have in 2 hands? Yes, Jay. Okay, let's keep going. Now, I'm going to ask you, and again, don't put it in the chat yet until I say go. How many fingers? Oh, that's a good question, Veronica. Yes, let's use the American ABC. That's a super good question. I know in Spanish we have la ñ, right? We have la ñ, and so that would change our counting system. Great point to bring up. For this exercise, let's just use the American ABC. All right, that's a good one. I'm gonna add it in my notes, Veronica, so I could like be clear about that next time. All right, so now I'm going to ask you, how many fingers and toes do you have altogether? How many fingers and toes do you have altogether using the ABC counting system? And don't drop it in yet until I say go. All right, go. Oh, you are so good. Good, right? We have T. We have a total of T fingers and toes. Good. So now we're going to continue playing a little bit. And I'm going to ask you just anything that's nearby that you feel you can count. If you need to take a few minutes to stand up and grab something, doesn't have to be super fancy. Like if you have some pens available or just tear pieces of paper, anything that's super easy for you to grab. So I'm going to give you all just a quick minute to just grab whatever you can that you feel you can count. And then you let me know if you need more time. We'll give folks about 3 minutes. Martha asking, are we doing double letters chapter 26? Good question, Martha. I hadn't thought about it that far. We won't count up to 26, but that's a good question. All right, we'll give everyone just a couple more minutes. Could be anything easy. And if you can't find anything, that's totally okay. All right, are we ready? Okay. So now I'm going to ask you to set aside of whatever items you grab, just set aside D, the number D items. So just set aside D items. Everyone still with me? All right, so now in the chat, I want you to tell me how many items did I ask you to set aside? How many items were D? Good, 4. All right. Okay, you all need a challenge, so we're gonna move on. We're not gonna do the next one. Now we're gonna get into addition. And so now I want you to add C plus A and jot that down. And then I want you to add D plus C. Jot down your answer, take note of your answer, and then we'll drop them all together in the chat. And then I also want you to add B plus G. Good. And then in the chat, try to respond using the alphabet. Try to respond using the alphabet. So Laura put in that first example there, right? C plus A equals D. All right, are we ready? Do we all have our responses? Okay. Drop them in the chat. What are the answers? I see DG. Ah, yes, you're correct, Ruby. Anyone else? Honestly, it was a little tricky for me when I did this. B plus G equals yes. Not so good at this. I wasn't either. It was really challenging for me. So I'm with you, Michelle. Cool. All right. Okay. So now I want us to try some subtraction. So adding a little bit more challenge. Now let's try some subtraction. Now remember, your answers are going to be using the alphabet. And we'll drop in the answers in the chat when I say go. So now do D minus A, I minus D, and then finally K minus H. Michelle, I think me and you are like ABC, right? That's what I'm having to do. All right, let's drop in the answers in the chat. You all are good. Yes, the answers are C, E, C. Good job. All right. So Thank you so much for participating in that. Right now, I want us to discuss what was that like, right? What was the experience of learning the alphabet counting system like? And so we can just talk about a whole group. So at this point, right, if you want to mute your mic and chime in, please feel more than welcome to. But in just thinking, right, what did it feel like? Was it challenging? For me, it was, right? What strategies or materials maybe did you use to help you solve the addition or subtraction problems? Did you use anything that maybe you see children use and that resembles the practices that children engage in when they're learning how to count? Also think about how this experience maybe could affect your approach, right, with children as they learn how to count. And then finally, how does what we just experienced relate to your work with multilingual learners, right? Because that's an added layer of things to consider, right, with counting and numbers. And so just thinking of our multilingual learners in specific who are maybe learning to count at the same time that they're learning a language, right? And so I'm going to invite you to unmute your mic and just share what the experience was like, and open-ended, right? I always provide some suggestions for you all to share, but please don't feel restricted to those.
Well, for me, it was like learning another language because we're so used to use numbers for math. You know, we do use letters, but that's like, in my case, I teach first grade. So, you know, you'll see letters when you're doing geometry or segment from A to C, but for the little ones, for me, it was difficult. And especially I've been out since January. I'm under industrial accident and I might be back to work on November 3rd. But so it was challenging and a little bit challenging trying to get myself together.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing, Martha. I love that you connected it to learning another language, right?
Yes.
I think I can share I share some of that that feeling with you. Anyone else want to share what it was like?
I
Oh, and
personally, oh,
no, yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
sorry. I personally felt like some of my students where I felt lost. So I was waiting, you know, when they look around to see like who answers first. And then like I was waiting for someone to answer before me before I felt stupid.
Yeah, right. And so, or just maybe to confirm your answer, because like you think you know, but you don't want to be the first one to say it. And so just making sure like, okay, I need some affirmation and making sure that someone else and other people are also on the same page. I saw Elizabeth in the chat, but I had to use my fingers to the max. Oh, something we see our kiddos rely on a lot, right? Good, good. All right. Laura, is there something you want to
Algebra because A plus B equals C, so you have to substitute. That's it.
Yeah, right. More complex than we thought. And so just thinking that for us as adults and looking through like an adult-centric lens, we often, and myself included, right, will just find myself thinking like, what's so hard about this, right? Come on, guys, you got this. But really understanding that just and numbers are symbols, right? And symbols are super abstract, right? And so even when learning the alphabet, understanding and making a connection that a symbol that's not familiar to you represents something is a huge learning task for our younger learners, right? To us, it comes easy, it comes natural just because we've done it for years, but wanted to definitely sort of recreate that experience, right? Of what our younger learners might go through, right, when learning the number system. Yeah, made us realize that counting might not be so automatic, right? Yeah, I said I included myself. I seem like what's so difficult about this? But again, we approach this as adults and for us it comes so natural, right? But definitely can be challenging when we take the moment to switch things up and put ourselves in students' shoes. Yes, cool. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat. I'm loving the engagement. All right. So now we are going to continue to move on and do an overview, right? But before we dive into just a deeper understanding of how children develop and understand number and counting right, I want us to pause for a moment and think about what we actually mean by those words, right? And so when we hear the word number, we might immediately think of that symbol, right? Like 1, 2, 3, what we're used to. But number is more than just written digits, right? Number represents, it represents a quantity, it represents a relationship even, right? Or maybe even an idea. And so number is really how we make sense of how many, how much more, right? How far. And so when we talk also about counting, we're really talking about one of the very first ways that children begin to organize and just make better sense of numbers. And so counting isn't just saying number words in order, right? It's way more than that. It's understanding how each word represents one object, right? That order always stays the same, and then that the last number word tells us the quantity, right? Or how many there are altogether. For those of us in early ed spaces, we know that these can be challenging for some of our students, right? In thinking of that last one that I mentioned, that the last number you count, right, is the number that represents how many there are all together. How many of you have students that can count perfectly well, right? They can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you say, how many are there? And then they're like, 10 or 4, right? And so just thinking of all the different components that there are to number and counting, right? And so they definitely have a skill, right? They've nailed down one-to-one number correspondence, the order, but maybe they need to specifically work on, and of course with our support, understanding that that last number in the sequence represents how many there are altogether. And so I don't know, what are some of your thoughts around when you heard the word number? How do you define number? Or what does it mean to count, right? This is kind of hard because I feel like it's almost so obvious to us that when it's time for us to articulate what our number is, or what does it mean to count, that can be a little bit challenging. So I'm gonna ask you in the chat, is there a way that you define number, or what does it mean to count? I'm gonna ask you to drop it in the chat real quick, see if anyone wants to. Math, good. Good, math, digits. Numerals, good. Abstract math, yeah. Was that a little challenging to define number, or to define what does it mean to count? It can be, right? Yeah, because once you sit down and think about it, it's like, wait, I just automatically know what it is, right? But when thinking of having to think about the definition and what it is, that can be a little challenging. Definitely was for me, right? And so today, right, today's goals, hopefully, right, we'll walk away with a better understanding and better ways to just articulate exactly what skills go into number and counting, and exactly what they are. And so for today, we're going to start with a simple idea. And so we know, right, that numbers can be used to represent quantity. In other words, how many. And so, for example, if we have 2 red circles, the number 2 tells us how many red circles there are, right? And so counting describes the process, right, by which we use to identify the quantity of objects in a group. And so when children count, they're learning to connect number words with actual objects, and they're figuring out how many there are in a set. And so altogether, this area of math, numbering, counting, right, includes concepts and skills that children need to understand, quantity, and to be able to count objects accurately. And so you may have heard of the word of the term number sense before, right? And so today we'll be talking about number sense, and that refers to just a broader, more general understanding of number and counting, right? And number operations. And so that includes things like addition and subtraction. And so for today, we're going to focus on number and counting, right? And some part of number sense. And then there are other sessions, right, that also include addition and subtraction, and we can totally come back and visit addition and subtraction, right, should we want to. And so finally, right, we'll be using some key math vocabulary today that's very connected to number and counting. All right. And so just letting you all know that we do have, I've uploaded a glossary on the participant folder, and it's specifically a glossary for number and counting vocabulary. And so that was provided by CPE, right? So I've uploaded it on the participant folder for you all to take a look at. All right. So there are different ways to represent a number, right? And again, in thinking of numbers, children often represent numbers with objects, right? They usually begin using these concrete objects to show quantity. And so, for example, the children might show you the number 4 by placing 4 rubber duckies, right, to present the 4. So using objects to represent numbers. Or of course, they can also use fingers, right? I'm still into to use my fingers. I won't shy away from that. I still use my fingers. They can use fingers. And then as they continue to grow and develop, children begin to use number words, right? And this is how they'll represent numbers using language. And then I want to highlight, right, that language includes spoken words and also sign language. And so, for example, a kiddo might say 4 in English, cuatro in Spanish, or bon in Vietnamese. And so typically what happens is by the end of preschool and into kindergarten, children start representing numbers using numerals, right? So number symbols, these written symbols. And so, for example, they might actually write the number 4, right? Or if they use sign language or have a device, right, they might represent numbers using sign language or their auditory device support system. And so just all of these are different ways in expressing really what's the same concept, right? It's understanding how many through just 4 different multiple ways of representation. And so does it ever happen to you all where you're maybe doing some small group instruction or you're supporting kiddos with math, and the child can count accurately, right? But then when you ask them to write down the number, they'll use a different symbol, or they'll use a symbol that doesn't represent any number? Have you ever experienced that?
Yes.
Yes, right. We all know that this happens. And so again, in thinking of the way kiddos develop their different ways to represent numbers, it doesn't mean that they can't count and that they don't have a level of skill, right? It just means that they're working toward using a numeral, a written symbol to represent that quantity, right? And so in other words, they know how to count quantities, right? But they're just still learning how to record numbers using numerals. This was a huge topic of debate when I was a kinder teacher, right? And we were talking about grading and what does the standard say, right? Can the children, I don't remember the exact standard, but one of the standards was counting. And so can the children count? And do we say they can if the written symbol is not there yet, right? And so really taking a deeper look at what exactly those skills consist of. And so, by the way, that's typically normal, right? In developing the ways that they count and that they understand numbers. Nothing to be alarmed about, right?
Yeah,
All
I have
right.
some students, that they know how to like recite, like to count like 1 to 30, but then when it comes to identify the number, like where's number 5, they have to start all over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have to like count again. Yeah, it's common.
Yes, yes, it'll come, right? It'll come. But so those children understand, right, that the order will never change, and they've got that skill down, and they've got the order now down, right? Now that we just have to work toward them connecting that number, or that counting, or that order with a written symbol. But yes. Oh, I miss teaching kinder. All right, so now we're going to discuss how young children develop an understanding of number and counting. And we'll talk about some of those skills, right? That we often think are maybe natural, but that there's so much involved in it. And so now that we've taken a closer look at what number and counting mean, let's take a closer look at some of the things you just mentioned, right? Of the kiddos being able to count in order, right? Or not being able to identify the symbol and instead having to go count back and use order as a support, right? When they're identifying that symbol, which I always say is a highly valuable skill because they're using their resources, right? They're using their resources. And so in the following slides, we'll go over the 4 important components of number and counting, right? And so the first one is attending to quantity. And so this means students noticing how many there are in a group of objects. And then the second one, comparing numbers. And this is understanding when one group has more, fewer, right? Or even the same number as another. And then 3, counting and cardinality, right? This is when students start to count and develop an understanding of cardinality. And this means using counting to determine how, not only how many, but also recognizing that the last number, right, word that they use to count in that series tells us the whole total. And then finally, the last stage is recognizing name and recording numerals. And so identifying, saying, and writing the symbols we use to represent numbers, right? Our numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, no alphabet counting system. All right. And so together, these 4 components build the foundation for early math understanding and just helping children connect quantities, number, words, right, and written numerals in meaningful ways. All right, so the first one that we're gonna jump into is attending to quantity. And so attending to quantity describes young children's ability to notice how many things there are in their environment. And so they'll start doing this way before they're in a formal classroom setting, right? And this also includes beginning to understand concepts of more or less, right? There's another image later where there's like I don't know if it's a video, we might have time to show it today, but kiddos start understanding the concept of more or less at a very early age, right? And so there's a video where a parent is holding a bowl of like goldfish, right? And that one has many. And then there's another bowl that only has one. The child can already identify at a very early age what bowl they want, right? They want the one with more goldfish. And so these conceptual understandings of math and of attending to quantity, right, develop at a very early age. Young children, right, infants can actually notice changes in numbers in the items that they see, so they can visibly tell, right, when there's 4 blocks as opposed to 1 block. They might not be able to articulate that yet, but they can definitely see it and recognize it. Now, as children get a little older, they start to show understanding in everyday situations, right? So like the toddler will grab the bowl with the most goldfish as opposed to the bowl with only 1 goldfish. Now, at this stage, it is important to note that their understanding of number is approximate, and so it's not precise yet, right? And so a baby as young as 6 months old probably won't notice a difference between 10 blocks or 12 blocks, but they would definitely notice a change from 10 blocks to 20 blocks, right? And so as children grow, this number sense becomes more refined, right? And they'll start to notice smaller and smaller changes, and their understanding and attending to quality becomes a lot more precise. All right. So now this brings us to subitizing. And I know there's nothing on the screen yet. We'll get to it in a little bit. But speaking of subitizing, right? Children and adults know how many objects there are, typically in a small set, through subitizing, right? And so subitizing is the ability to just immediately observe a number of objects in a group without having to count. And so now I'm going to put an image on the screen and we're going to practice our subitizing skills. I'm going to leave it on for a couple seconds. It'll be quick. It's okay if you didn't catch it. There'll be more opportunities, but I'll show it for 1 or 2 seconds. And then as soon as you can tell how many there are, drop it in the chat. Are we ready? All right, here we go. It's going to go quick. Who caught that? Oh, y'all are so fast. Good. Yes. Okay, I'll be quicker on the next one. Yes, right. So we all observed 5 dots, right? Okay. Now we're going to do another one. How many dots are there here? Did you all catch that? Were you ready? Y'all are super fast. So you make me feel like I have to work on my subitizing skills. All right, so how many were there in that last one? Okay, I think this is the next image. These animated slides. Yeah, so there were 3, 4, 5, 3. All right, so there were 10. Y'all are right. Okay, ready for the next one? So I'm trying to do it faster because y'all are too good. All right, how many were there? So now I'm going to ask you, which one was easier to recognize? Because both of them had 10. Which one was easier for you to recognize? The second. Why the second one?
Because I already know the pattern of 2 and 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, 1 in the middle equals 5. So it's even though you did it so quickly, it's 10. Versus the other one, I counted by 2s.
Oh, you counted by 2s, right? So we'll talk about right now about what different strategies each one of us use, right, to figure that out. But yeah, I think the other one is directly from like the dice, right? And so that's a pattern that's easily recognizable for us. Good. All right, ready for the next one?
Dominoes also.
All dominoes, yes. 5 to 5. Yeah, you easily recognize a 5. All right. And so now that brings us to a quick reminder from what we saw in the last session. So last session, we talked about math mindsets. And one of the math mindsets, right, that we want to make sure stays at the forefront in our approach to supporting children and families engage in mathematical practices is I was going to say the belief, but more than a belief, I want to say it's a fact that math is everywhere. And so what we all just experienced was subitizing with dots, but how do we see subitizing in our everyday life, right? And so I'm going to show you just a quick image of something that we would see in everyday life. And again, I want you to practice your subitizing and tell me how many there are in that group. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Did anyone get that? Ooh, so we see a variety of answers here. I don't know. I don't remember, and I didn't catch it. Should we go back and see that one and verify? All right, how many was it? Oh, it was 10. All right, ready for the next one? All right. Okay, here goes the next one. Couple seconds. Did you catch that? You all are so fast, I would never. Okay, let's go back and verify. I see 10, I see 9. I myself have no idea. Can I exit full screen? Ah, no, my nuggets. So how many oranges?
2, 4, 6, 8, 9.
9. It was 9. Oh, and then I this was funny. It made me laugh, but I put a little white circle here because you could see part of an orange, and I felt like it was those verifiers where you have to verify you're not a robot, and I always get those wrong. They're so complicated, and so I thought I'm gonna make it easy and straightforward for everybody, and there's no confusion as to what oranges we're counting. All right, is this the orange one? Yeah, this is the orange one. All right, ready? So that's the orange one. There was 9. Now the last one, right? I hope you didn't get a chance to see it when it showed when I exited. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. How many nuggets? That one was a little more challenging, right? And so the larger the quantity gets, yeah, the more challenging it is. The more challenging it is. Let's go back and see. How many nuggets? Looks like 16 medium. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I count 14. Am I wrong? Help me out.
14.
14. And I had to do it the old fashioned way and count one by one by one. All right. And let me skip through it here. Go to my next one. All right. So actually, right, before we move on to this slide, I mean I knew about subitizing and it was part of my math curriculum, but I always wondered like, okay, what's the connection, right, with higher order like math skills? And so now I understand that subitizing might seem like a simple skill, right, and just recognizing small quantities without counting, but it's actually a powerful foundation for so many other areas of math learning. And so when kiddos are engaged in subitizing, they are actively building number sense because they begin to see numbers as quantities that can be broken apart. And so this is where that like initial conceptual understanding begins to develop, right? They see the image and they understand quantities that can be broken apart or put together in different ways. And so this directly connects to skills of adding and subtracting, right? Because children who can instantly recognize groups, like seeing 5 as this is 2 and this is 3, are already thinking and developing that flexibility around the way they feel and that they think about numbers. Also, someone mentioned patterns earlier, so glad you mentioned that. But subitizing, right, also supports pattern recognition and even spatial reasoning. And so both of which, right, help children understand that number relationships and operations later on when they have to engage in more complex math practices. And then, right, we also give children the opportunity. Subitizing is fun to play and to notice and to talk about quantities just like we did. And so we are really laying the groundwork for deeper mathematical thinking in the years ahead. All right. And so that brings us to now comparing numbers, right? And so that component that we just discussed, right, attending to quantity, provides again the foundation for our next big concept, which is this one, comparing numbers and quantities. And so when children compare numbers, they're figuring out which group has more, which group has less, or which groups are the same. And then as they do this, they're also using their mathematical language, right? And so they're having to engage with not only conceptual understanding of more or less, but they're also learning vocabulary to attach to that to be so that they're able to articulate their understandings of quantities. And so words like more, less, right, same, to be able to describe what they notice. Now, language, right, can increase in complexity. Going back to when I was teaching, right, I always felt that the language more than, less than was a very complex language skill that students needed support with. They can identify, right, what group had more or less than, but when it came able to articulate how many more than or how many less than, that's when that language support really needed to be in place, right? So that they could should be able to articulate their thinking, because they knew it and they were able to identify it, right? But they needed language support to be able to do that. That's a super complex linguistic complex skill that our students need support with, especially our multilingual learners. And so you'll see kiddos engage in things like this one has more, this one has less, right? And they'll use also different strategies when comparing numbers. And so sometimes kids just visually compare, right? There's no need to count. I can just visually see what group has more, what group has less than. And then other times, and some of you might have engaged in this when you were practicing the subitizing, can match one object to a set of another, right? So if I see 3 here and I see 3 here and that matches, right, that helps me compare those numbers. And then also, right, they'll just count, right? If they have the skill, they can count to see which group has more or less than. And so now we're going to take a few minutes to explore each one of those strategies and just think about how children might use these in real world scenarios. There it goes. All right. So what are the different ways that you could compare the number of carrots and bananas in this basket? So again, we could just do a whole group and send you off to small groups, but what are the different ways? If you look at the picture on the slide, right, there's 2 baskets. There's one with carrots and there's a one with bananas. What are different ways that you could compare the number of carrots to the apples of bananas in this basket? And I'll give you just a time to think about it, or if you want to unmute your mic and just jump in and tell us what are some of the ways that you think, right, could help us compare these quantities.
You can match them 1 to 1 to make pairs.
1 to 1, right? Especially the ones on the table, like I see. Oh, actually, I was gonna say I see, I see 2 bananas, 2 carrots, but my chat box was blocking that screen. But yes, like for example, on the tables, I can see, well, there's 2 bananas, 2 carrots, and then there's 1 carrot left over, right? So matching, yes, right? Good. Anything else? Pairs, groups. You can take them out and count them, right?
Estimating, like you can see that there's more bananas than carrots.
Yeah, you
Or
can just see it, right? In the basket, I can tell there are more bananas, no need for me to count. And so again, when you can just see it, that's just visual comparing, right? Visual comparing just by looking at the sets.
and also, you can count all the
Yeah.
carrots, and all the bananas.
Yeah, you can count them, and then someone already said the matching, right? So you all identified, right, the 3 different ways or the 3 different strategies that kiddos develop over time, right, to build a deeper understanding of quantity and number. But good. All right. So just another visual of those 3 strategies, right? Visually comparing. I don't have to count. I can tell this one has more. How many more? I might not know that yet, or maybe to me it doesn't matter, right? But I can definitely tell this one has more, this one has less. And then the matching, right? The matching, you can line them up and visually see after you've matched them that this one has more. And then finally counting, right? Which I was doing in the subitizing, which makes me think of some skills that I might have to work on, right? But when we were subitizing, I was having to count. And so that pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, right? Something that I know I have to work on. All right, let's move on. And so that brings us to our first breakout activity. I do think it's a fun one. And so what it is, and I'll drop the link in the chat for that first activity. And it's a collaborative file. We'll send you all to breakout rooms. And I think we could do groups of 2 or 3. Over here, sorry, there it goes. And so what it is that if you jump into that slide deck that I just shared in the chat, we're going to take turns counting objects. And so in your group of 2 or 3 people, you're going to identify who's going to be the first person to count, and you'll say that on the top of the slide it says counter 1, and so that'll be the first person to count. Now, as you're counting and figuring out how many items there are on that slide deck, right? The rest of the people there are observing what strategies you're using in counting, right? And so I want you to also think about how are they keeping track, right, of the objects that they've counted? Are they missing any that still need to count? Is the person skip counting? How are they doing it, right? Also, what language are they using when they're counting? Not only language like English or Spanish or any other language, right?
But the link doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work? What?
Yeah, it showed that doesn't exist. So maybe you miss a letter or something.
Maybe, let me go back. You know what? If you go back to your participant folder, it's in your participant folder. Let me see if I could go find the link to the participant folder.
Where do I find the participant folder? I came in late.
Oh yeah, it's okay. Let me drop it in the chat. All right, I'm gonna have to go back.
It is in the chat.
You put it in the chat?
Uh-huh.
Okay, cool. So let's go to the, see, I scrolled all the way up in the chat. I'm gonna scroll all the way down. All right, so if you open up that participant folder, what's not working?
It won't allow me to open the participant folder either.
Ay, ay, ay. All these technical difficulties today. Okay, it just allowed me, but let me share the direct link and see if that helps. All right, so I placed
Manage access, because I was able, but if they don't.
Share. Thank you for your patience with this. It's, I don't know why.
There, just go down.
There.
I was able to open it directly from the folder.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So once you open it in the folder, go to the 1021 folder. And then once you're in the 1021 folder, open the folder titled collaborative work. And then once you're in there, you'll hear, let me make sure everyone has access. And you all can edit because you will have to edit this one. Okay, so you should all have access. So I'll send you all to groups, right? And so there'll be a group 1, and then we're gonna count, right, quantities. And so you'll identify who's counter 1, who's counter 2, and if there's a third person in your group who's counter 3. Now, as you're counting, right, the other 2 people there, your other partner, is there observing what strategies you're using, what language you're using, right, as you are counting. And so what you can do a rock, paper, scissors to decide who goes first, or one fun one that I like is identify who woke up the earliest, and they're the ones that are counting first. And so leave your mics on, right? Kind of talk through what you're thinking or doing as you're counting, so that whoever is observing has a better idea of your reasoning, right, behind why you're counting the way you're counting. And so we're gonna open up breakout rooms. Laura, can you support me with that piece, please?
Sure.
And we'll do groups of 2 or 3. Any questions before I send you off to breakout rooms on what you're supposed to do?
No.
All right. And if I know it's the evening and I know that there's always a million things going on, if you can't participate in the breakout room, that's okay. Feel free to hang out in here, right? I know some of us are maybe on the road or out somewhere. That's totally okay.
How many minutes?
Let's do 8 minutes. We'll do 8 minutes and then we'll check in.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Maria.
It kicked me. Oh, you brought me back to the big.
We're back. We're
We're back, I
back.
guess, in
We're
session.
back.
Okay.
Yes, thank you all so much. Maria, I'm so sorry that was your experience. If that ever happens again, come back to us, leave the breakout room, and we're happy to jump in conversation with you.
It didn't give me an option.
Oh, you couldn't leave. Oh
No.
no, you were trapped.
Yeah, I said leave the meeting, but it wouldn't let you leave the break.
Oh, just leave the breakout room. Okay, so thank you for that feedback because then next time we can put participants can leave the breakout room anytime they want. Thank you so much, Maria. I'm sorry that that happened. But thank you everyone for taking the time to engage in that activity. And so I just want to hear some reflections, right? Like as you maybe while you were the counter, right? What helped you keep track of the objects you were counting, maybe, or if you were an observer, what strategies did you use? Did you see the counter utilize, right, to help them support their counting of objects? Did anyone see any skip counting, right? Or what language was used while you were engaged in counting? So I'm gonna invite everyone to unmute their mics and just jump in into the conversation and share some reflection of what that activity was like.
Oh, for me, this is wrong. Sorry, I have to have my camera off because otherwise I'll lose you.
It's
Um,
okay.
for us in the group, we're talking about the fact that in the first slide, for me, even though the my eyes gravitated to the brighter colors, and I didn't get a chance to count it. All I knew that it gravitated to the red portion. I knew there were. It seems like a lot, but when I saw the other objects, which was the bees, yellow, dull um, color. I didn't even count it. All I knew that one of them was more, the other one was less, right?
Mhm.
But still, even my eyes gravitated to the brighter colors in the bigger objects. So in the second slide, it was hard for me to decide how to count them. Do I count it by color? Do I count it by size? Do I count it by like just in general? There was no order that I
Mhm.
can go maybe straight across or in a circle. So it made it difficult. So I needed to make an executive decision. Okay, what do I do? Focus on one color, on one size, or not, or just count in general. So kids can get confused. I put myself in their shoes. I- It can be confusing and frustrating.
Right, and you bring up a good point that I hadn't thought about, right? The colors. And so just of thinking also of like UDR, Universal Design for Learning, right? What images are we using? What objects are we using? And how those can work maybe for a group of students, but not for all groups of students. And so just some different considerations to keep in mind. But thank you so much, Veronica, for sharing your reflection. Yes, I intended it to be challenging, right? And so it was a setup. It was a setup. I intended it to be that way. But thank you so much for sharing, Veronica. Anyone else want to share either strategies they used, any challenges they encountered, or anything you observed? I'll leave space for one more comment.
We were just discussing that it was really hard on paper and not physically having something where you can move it or actually a
Manipulate.
pencil to mark it, something, all the strategies we thought we couldn't use them.
Yes, you're right. And you know what? Before sending you off to great breakout rooms, I gave you editing access. My intention was to share with you that you could move the objects around and manipulate them. But I didn't share that with you. But you did have editing access. So just out of curiosity, did anyone move the objects around?
For us, it said view only because I tried to move them. And I thought like the 3 dots on the upper left-hand corner were actual like counters. And I said, okay, I'm gonna
Oh.
place the counter on each of the objects, but then it said view only, so we didn't have like access to edit it.
What? Oh my gosh. So many technical difficulties today. Apologies for that. I thought I updated access and so you would be able to manipulate and move the objects around, right? And so my fault. It was so difficult. But thank you for being willing to share and participate, right? It was difficult to keep track, right, of which ones you had counted like you shared previously. But just right, even as adults, this activity was challenging, right? And oftentimes when we're engaged in counting, we almost do it without having to think about it, unless it's a little more challenging, like it was today. But just many of the strategies that we use to count, right? They sort of come naturally, right? Maybe some of you were, like you were saying, it would have been easier just to mark one off, and that's how you know which ones you're counting. So those strategies come super natural to us as adults, right? And so again, just thinking of what it takes for a child who is learning how to count. And we'll continue discussing some of these concepts and skills that children need to learn in order to develop, right, and have a better understanding of counting and cardinality in a couple of slides. But before we move on to that, I want to introduce you all and give a warm welcome to Rashi from Shunya Kids. And so we're so lucky that she's joining us here today. And so Rashi is going to share some of the amazing work that her and her team at Shunya Kids are doing to support early learning and playful, right, math exploration. And so if everyone can please help me welcome Rashi, I'm going to hand it over to her and she'll share a little bit about the work that her and her team are doing over at Shunya Kids. So thank you so much for joining us, Rashi.
Thank you for having me here. As I'm Rashi, you might have seen me at CABE. CABE is one of our really big champions, and we love, love, love CABE. And in our mission-aligned partnership, our multilingual platform today will be available for you. I know, Natalie, you will send me the email addresses of everybody. So tomorrow I'll send an email out that should have a promo code for you to explore Shunne Kids. It's our way to saying thank you back to CABE. And if you like the program and if you wanted it to be implemented in your classroom, we're happy to kind of have that conversation, but it will be available for you. I'm requesting for you to allow me to share my slides. I'll walk you through some of the work that we're doing.
Yes.
Our program is it's a multilingual literacy and numeracy application. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Rashi, I hate to interrupt you, but I want to make sure that you're able to share your screen, right? And so I know that I'm still sharing mine. So
it says the host isn't
there it goes.
allowing.
I just
okay,
got the
perfect.
notification. It's been a
Nobody's
terrible day
moved.
for technology today, Rashi.
We're getting into the Mercury retrograde. I don't know if you heard, but yesterday there was AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, was down. So pretty much like a lot of stuff was
A
down
lot of,
for us
yeah,
yesterday.
I don't know
So
what it was about today. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Rashi. I'll let you.
So for some of you, you might know of the program, but for those that don't, the name of the program is Shunne Kids. And I always like to start off with a why, because our sweet spot is from pre-K, TK to first grade. We really work with early learners. And we know from all of the science that's out there that if children don't know their word formation, or if they don't know the early math, by third grade, they're going to be left behind, really left behind. So we deal with small children, and therefore engagement metrics at this age are critical. So our whole mission is to create a love for learning. That's why we as a company exist. And we understand for these little kiddos, learning is not only academic, it's social, emotional. So if children can see themselves in the learning outcomes are better. And for our pedagogy, we are inspired by the RITEC framework. You all might already know of RITEC framework, but in case you don't, it is a framework that is similar to universal design, as you talked about. It is a framework that was developed by UNICEF and Lego Group, and they brought in children from 30 countries and talked about how you can design digital experiences for the well-being of children. So design is a really critical part at the center of how we're going to be able to present work to small kiddos. And in that framework, there are certain pillars, and Shunya Kids align with those pillars, autonomy being one of them. You'll see in our application, there are open-end tasks with multiple solutions, and that's designed with intention. And it's built for competence, and teachers can scaffold the learning, both in literacy and math. And some of you might know it, some of you might not, but my background, I have a master's in filmmaking. That's what I came to US for. And then I went and worked in the media industry for many years, but I started this company when my kids went to Montessori, and I got completely inspired by tactile learning and wanting to give my English language learners an ability to learn their language. Now they speak 3 languages fluently. But coming back to this, visuals and the sounds that you put in front of the little kids makes an impact on their brains. So you want to make sure that that's aligned with the RITEC framework as well. And the program is used in small groups during center time, so it really fosters those relationships. It's a creative platform. It is very diverse and inclusive, and it's a safe environment for children to practice. I know I have only 15 minutes, so I'm speaking a bit fast. But if you look at the digital platforms, pretty much they look like this. It's overstimulating for the brains, and we frown upon that in terms of the company. If you look at, this is a research by Tufts University that shows even today, most of the learning that we give to children in books and media is not equitable. So we're a multilingual platform. We're available in 5 languages, but this is schools districts are mainly using it for English and Spanish. It has 3 experiences in the program. If you're an admin, it gives you complete data of the district. So you can look at the data, you can look at how teachers are using it per school. If you are a teacher today, we have set up a promo code, as you can see, CABE team, and I'll send this deck to you. So you can create your own classrooms, and you can test it out, whether you want to test it out in your classroom or you want to project it on the screen, it will be available for you. But in the future, if you ever wanted, we do have clever integration. There are 3 things in the platform. I'll quickly walk you through this. This is if you are a teacher. If you are a teacher, you can choose the language that you want your children to practice. If you're a DLI program, you're probably doing a 90-10 model working into 50-50 model. So all you do is based on, I'm going to actually focus on math because this is math focused, counting and cardinality. Let's say you're doing counting and cardinality. You can choose the topic that you want your child to practice. And then on the top, you choose the language. If you don't want English, if you just want Spanish to be available, then you just choose Spanish. And these activities or lesson plans will be available for your child just in Spanish. So you don't go around buying multiple softwares for English and Spanish, for literacy and numeracy. It's all available to you in a holistic experience in one program. Then there are small little games for children, especially if you have a TK classroom, you really do go by UPTKF standards, which talks about play-based learning, theme-based, play-based learning, and that's what we align with. That's what you're seeing on the screen. Everything is theme-based. These are some print concepts. This is some literacy. I have the literacy slides, so I'll just kind of walk you through quickly. As you can see, it's equitably designed for English as well as Spanish. In Spanish, you're looking at sounds together versus one letter sound in English. Then this is rhyme recognition, lots of games for children to build their foundational skills in literacy. Then we go into numeracy. We just received a federal grant from the US Department of Education to expand on multilingual numeracy. This is the early steps which is available for teachers. So if you try the app tomorrow, you will see all of these games available in numeracy, counting and cardinality, geometry, small games for them to find numbers on the number line, identifying place on the number line. And then there is skip counting by 5, skip counting by 2s, all of the games that you're doing around second grade, TK to second grade. And everything is done with keeping a whole child perspective. So whether you're learning literacy or numeracy, we can still do it as a global perspective, because children are global citizens, as we say so. So I'll just quickly show you a 2-minute demo, and that would be the end of the presentation. And I'm happy to share this deck with you for you to use tomorrow.
Welcome to Shunya Kids. Shunya Kids is a multilingual platform that provides Common Core aligned early literacy and math curriculum in 5 languages. Designed for young learners, Shunya is used worldwide in classrooms and homes to provide a diverse and culturally rich educational experience.
I love Shunya Kids because it is so dynamic. It is game-based. It provides social interaction. Kids can see themselves in it, and they can move from language to language, and that's awesome.
Shunya Kids meets our literacy goals because it offers many different opportunities for our students to practice language. It offers them many opportunities to look at language in vocabulary, articles of clothing, in vegetables and fruits, and all of those things that a young little person sees in their everyday world.
I used the new activities during target time. Really enjoyed the rhyming one. It's really good. And then they were really excited that they were able to build words. Some of my students that I have like 2, some really struggle. They were having success with it. So that was good.
Crumble, wiggle, giggle, giggle, wiggle.
Elote, bote. Hermana, hermana.
Elephant, yogurt.
¿Qué? Parque.
Wheel, wheel.
Right now, it's coming in very handy as I'm starting to do our assessments. That then has become my group rotation, as they're working on Shunya at my table while I test a student, and then I can just kind of grab. I love the little conversations that happen. Same thing, they're working in this little table group of 4. You know, we spend a half of our day trying to pull out good, meaningful conversation about the thing we're learning, and it creates it nicely on its own.
It helps a lot to have technology that it's authentic in Spanish and that it's play-based. It's appropriate for the development and the age of this group.
I think it's really impactful, especially because the culturally responsive dressing up of the characters. They're like, Maestra, what is this? And it just like opens up their mind, like asking questions. They're like, okay, I want to do this. And then they don't even know that they're learning because they think they're playing. You're learning. It's been awesome in my classroom.
So that was a quick demo of the product. But one of the things that we heard from teachers again and again is that when we're doing, especially DLI teachers, when we're doing math, where is the language in it? And therefore, as we're expanding into numeracy, we're bringing a lot more language while you're doing math. So all of that will be available, is available to you. And I'll be sharing this deck. I'm sorry, I don't know how to get out of the screen sharing mode tomorrow. And it will also have my email address. So if you wanted to spend some time learning more, I'm happy to kind of do a one-on-one with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rashi, for your presentation. And so Thanks also for your partnership, right? And so because of our partnership, everyone who is a CPE cohort member will have access to the platform. Rashi asked me for everyone's emails a couple of days ago, and I haven't yet given them to her, but I promised I would have them to her by tomorrow. I do know that some of you have shared your personal emails, and so maybe I'll be reaching out to some of you and see if you prefer that I share your organization email. But Maria, we'll catch up in a little bit. But yeah, so thank you so much, Rashi, for joining us, and thank you so much for providing access to our cohort members.
Thank you for having me. Have a good evening, and I'll connect with you, Natalie, later.
Yes,
Thank
and
you, everybody.
I'll send over those emails. Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so you're all going to have access to Shunya Kids, right? And so I'll share those emails with Rashi. She's been a longtime partner of CABE, and she reached out and said, you know, is there anything that I can support with? And so they've just added that math component recently. The literacy is a lot more developed than the math component. And I said, well, we have this new STEAM cohort, right? And it would be great if teachers would have access to that numeracy digital component. And so she said, of course. And so you'll have access to that platform as soon as I share your emails. And then I think once I share your emails with her, she'll send over an access code and instructions so you could set up your classroom portal. All right, now it's 5:15. I kind of just realized that we never took a break. And so thank you so much for hanging with me for almost 2 straight hours. We just still have a little bit more to cover. And I can go through that. Yeah, we can finish up. And so we'll wrap it up quickly. Next time, if you all need a break, feel free to interrupt me because I can just keep going and going and going. But you know, feel free to call me out and say, Natalie, give us a 5-10 minute break, and I'm happy to do that. Any questions about the Shunya access before we move on? Okay. Now let me go back to sharing my screen, see if I could figure this out because I don't know why it's been so challenging for me today. Okay, there it goes. And then, wait, am I not? I think I'm sharing the wrong one. Okay, there it goes. And then let me go to slideshow mode. Okay, there we have it. And so we were going to jump into counting principle number 1, right, which is that stable order. And this is right, how children understand that counting always has a stable order and that order does not change, right? And so when we think about the way children learn to count, they do so by observing others, and that can be adults, teachers, or families, community members, and even other children, right? I like how someone shared earlier that when we were doing the alphabet counting, right, they were waiting to see what others were putting. And so, yeah, it's a good research, right? Research to observe others. And so children do this all the time with counting, and as they're trying to figure out how many things there are. And so as children begin to count with meaning, they'll start to apply these 3 principles, right? And the first one that we'll talk about right now is stable order. And then there's a 1-to-1 correspondence, and then finally cardinality. And so all stable order means is that the number of words will always come in a specific unchanging order, right? The order never changes no matter what you're counting. And so for that kiddo, that the student that you shared earlier, that someone shared earlier, where they can count and they know the order, right? But then when having to tell them, like, I'll go back, well, they've got the stable order skill down, right? And so just an example of that, you know, children always know, or will work toward understanding, right, that in English it will always be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, right? And most children will start to recite parts of a counting list around age 2, right? Very typical that they'll start practicing counting. And then finally at about age 4, most of them can count a list up to 10 and begin to understand that numbers always follow a predictable order and unchanging order. All right, so now I also want to talk about very quickly, wish we had more time for this. Maybe we'll be intentional and cover more time for this in the next session, but the role of language in counting, right? And so thinking specifically about our multilingual learners and the way they're learning to recite the count list, right? In language, in multiple languages. So languages that they're exposed to at home, languages that they're exposed to at school. And so thinking specifically again about our multilingual learners, it might look a little different, right? But it follows the same developmental path. And so, for example, a child who hears Spanish at home, right, and English in their education setting might first say their early number words in Spanish, right? Because that's what they've been practicing and exposed to at home, right? And so, uno, dos, tres, right? And then as they spend more time in English, that conceptual understanding, right, of the order is there. Now they're just gaining the vocabulary to be able to apply that conceptual knowledge and articulate that in English or whatever target language program they're in, right? And so what's important to remember is that multilingual learners learn to count at the same pace as monolingual children, right? And so their learning is it's different because it's happening across language, but definitely same developmental pace. And now also we have to think about how children who are exposed to different languages, right, can also help or shape how they understand counting. And so in some languages like Chinese or Japanese, there's a very transparent number system that will directly map out a base 10 structure. And so for example, in Chinese, the number 11, when that's translated, it's 10, 1, right? And so again, just this will help shape their understanding around numbers and counting. Now in languages such as English and Spanish, there's a less direct system. Yeah, there are some connections there. But for example, 11 is 11, right? It's not like it's 10 and 1 or 10, 1. And so research shows that children learning languages with more transparent systems like the 10 and the 1 in Japanese and Chinese may have an easier time at first learning how to recite numbers, right? Especially those after 10. All right, so now we're gonna move on. And so now, right, talking about counting principle number 2, one-to-one correspondence. And again, this is the ability to designate one item to one number, right? Can be a struggle, right, for some kiddos in the early stages while they're developing their numeracy. For example, imagine a child counting a number of items, right? They might touch a couple of items at the same time and say something like 1, 2, 3, 4, but they might still be working to identifying a single item and making sure that they're only counting and using one-to-one correspondence. This practice takes a lot of modeling, right, and practice from us as educators, from families, from community members, from older siblings, right, from everyone who really has access to the child. And so they're learning also from them, right? But each child has to understand that each item gets only counted once. Now, something to consider is that as children are developing this skill, their executive functioning also plays an important role. And so executive functioning can include things like the ability to ignore distraction, right? Or the ability to remember information for short periods of times. And that's working memory. And so when children are counting, they're tapping into multiple skills, right? And so like for example, they'll need to remember which items they already counted if they don't have another support system, like physically moving the items to another place or crossing them off with a pencil, right? They'll have to remember which ones have been counted for, and they'll need to focus on that task without getting distracted. And so yeah, number one-to-one correspondence is definitely about counting, but there are also other skills that they're having to balance as they're engaging in counting. So like just being able to focus right on the task at hand, memorizing, so they're working their memory and having to remember which ones were already counted for, and then attention skills, right, that will support learning across other areas. All right, and so I like the little blocks on the fingers there. And so that brings us to cardinality, right? And as mentioned earlier, cardinality is understanding that when counting, the last number that you've counted in that sequence represents the quantity of the set, right? So this is the last number I counted, that's how many there are in that set. And so just a quick example, a child might show a roll of, or you might show a child a roll of 5 items, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if they understand cardinality, they'll be able to identify and say the word 5, right? And that names the last apple, but it also names the quantity of objects in that set. Developing an understanding of cardinality is quite complex and again requires a ton of practicing with counting. And so most children will typically develop a solid understanding of cardinality by the end of TK, sometimes kinder, right? And so it's just important also that with that said, right, should be happening by the end of TK kinder, right, that all children develop at their own pace and in their own way, right? And so there'll be a variety of factors that can impact children's understanding of counting. And so with that, I want us to bring us back to our alphabet counting and principles. And so now that we reviewed, right, the principles, so the stable order principle, right? And then the one-to-one corresponding, and finally the cardinality. I want us to know before we wrap up for tonight, just reflect very quickly on how these 3 principles came to play or were practiced or not, right? Or still needed some working on when we were using the alphabet counting system. So I'll open it up to discussion and conversation, but thinking of the 3 principles, remember the order, right? The one-to-one correspondence and the cardinality. How did these just present themselves when we were working on our new counting system with the alphabet? Anyone want to share?
You know, like the alphabet, you know, is the same thing, is stable. You know, we start with A, B, C, D, you know, it's like the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then one-to-one correspondence, well, I think is like the graphic, the phoneme and the grapheme. You know, the letter A, and this is how you write the letter, the sound A has you know, letter A, the sound has, you know, the grapheme, the letter. So I think it's like same thing, like one-to-one correspondence. And then when you stop, like, for example, when we were doing the additions or the subtraction or the counting, cardinality is where you stop. Like when we were counting A, B, C, D, that was the cardinality. That's what I understood. I don't know. Okay.
Oh yeah,
So
you're absolutely right, Martha. Thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better myself, but yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so right, we were engaging in those counting principles while we were working on our alphabet counting system. But yes, you're absolutely right. The one-to-one correspondence, you know what helped me with that is that I was having to go like use a finger and say A when I said like show me the number of D objects, like A, B, C, D, right? And then I was able to say, all right, use a finger for each letter. And so that was that's how the one-to-one correspondence showed up for me in that alphabet counting principle.
well, yeah, right. You know, like now that you're seeing it, me too. You know, I was going like like A, B, C, yeah, doing the fingers too. Yeah, but yeah, now you're right.
Yeah, and I still use my fingers for math all the time. But that brings us to the end of today's sessions. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Before you leave though, I do want to invite you to just drop in the chat whatever you feel comfortable with, just any one thing that stood out to you today or anything that you learned from today. If you could please share in the chat. And then I'm going to stop share so that I could see my chat. There it goes. Oh, and then before you all head out, just want to make sure that everyone completed their attendance form. The attendance form. Make collections, yes. And then there's a great website on counting collections. I'll drop it into that participant folder. I'll drop the link in there. But it's basically from the researcher, right, who developed counting collections and counting collection activities, that we got that activity where we were counting from. Well, mine was modified to be a virtual version, but there's counting collection activities for our older kiddos. And so I know a lot today we talked about like just early learning and the different development stages in our earlier learners, but there are counting collection activities that have been designed for our older students who are engaging in more complex activities around counting. All right. Cool. So with that said, thank you all so much for joining us. And so I will send over to Rashi everyone's email, and she'll then provide an access code so that you have access to Shunya Kids, the learning platform. And she'll give us access to both the literacy component and the math component, right? And so I'll share those emails with her so that you get your access code, and then we get free access to Shunya Kids. I will also stay a bit behind to see if there are any additional questions, and that can be any questions about the content you all saw today or more logistical pieces like the cohort member requirements or anything that you feel you need. But with that, I don't want to keep you on more longer than I should. You were all super respectful and great, and an amazing group to have. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll be reaching out also with those surveys about what you prefer for coaching times. And then as far as PD, we won't see each other again until December. So thank you all so much.
May I speak with you?
Yes, of course.
It's because I didn't attend the first session, and I'm not teaching right now, so I want to know, like, the coaching, and then I don't know if I'm going to work on November, so